There are moments when silence cuts deeper than any word ever could. For Lauren Sanchez, that silence arrived in just 2 chilling syllables too late. They came not in anger but in a whisper from the world's richest man spoken inside a Venetian palace where crystal chandeliers gleamed like frozen lightning. Shadows crawled across polished marble floors, turning celebration into theater. This was never just the ending of a love story. It was the revelation of a blueprint years in the making. A design so precise, so calculated, it showed how true power never parades under the spotlight, but hides behind velvet curtains and golden masks. What the world saw as romance was in reality a master performance. Every gown, every gondola ride, every carefully placed guest scripted to serve purpose over passion. Each photograph, each champagne toast, each tender vow was not proof of love but evidence. A trail being built piece by piece for something far colder than anyone imagined. But this tale does not truly begin with those whispered words. Its roots stretch back months earlier inside Manhattan's towering law firms, where locked doors keep secrets and the language spoken is power. Here in private offices, lawyers stitched together a document like no other, a contract so ruthless. One insider murmured it resembled a corporate acquisition more than a marriage. This was no ordinary prenup. It was a weapon, clauses sharpened like blades, silence clauses, image clauses, inheritance clauses, influence clauses. Each line crafted not to protect but to bind, to isolate, and if necessary to annihilate. One misstep, one misplaced signature, and the whole empire could collapse in a single devastating chain reaction. Lauren was handed the contract at her most fragile hour, just days before the wedding. With gowns tailored, headlines drafted, and the world watching, her own advisors were quietly edged out, replaced by his circle, until she stood alone, surrounded by pressure and expectation. Believing she was signing into forever, she unknowingly stepped into a labyrinth designed by the sharpest legal minds money could command. The Venetian wedding that followed was not a union but an opening act. Under chandeliers imported from Paris and across canals glimmering in Mediterranean light, guests toasted in couture gowns, convinced they were celebrating love. But behind the glitter, another script was being written. Discreet cameras captured whispers, microphones tracked conversations, and photographers framed not romance but records. What the world hailed as the fairy tale of the decade was in truth the first move in a ruthless game. A game where every smile, laugh, and fleeting remark became ammunition. The next 30 days were no honeymoon, they were a silent countdown. Lauren floated through her new life glowing with the belief she was ascending into billionaire royalty, unaware that invisible systems had already been deployed. Algorithms dissected her social media for breaches. Private investigators shadowed lunches, shopping trips, and friendly chats. Each public moment, each soundbite, each glossy photograph was quietly archived. She thought she was curating an image. She thought she was building her brand. In reality, she was assembling her own dossier, brick by brick, page by page, a case file that would one day stand against her. The turning point didn't erupt with screaming headlines or public scandals. It arrived quietly, carried on whispers. Whispers of betrayal, whispers of private meetings with media magnates, whispers of secret conversations with entertainment power brokers, and whispers that drifted too close to the orbit of rivals. In the rarefied world of billionaires, betrayal is never just emotional, it is political. It is financial, it is a threat to survival itself. Once those invisible boundaries were crossed, her downfall became inevitable. The strike, when it came, was merciless, swift, surgical. Lawsuits landed in multiple states. Assets froze overnight, networks were warned. Alliances that once seemed unshakable disintegrated in hours. Doors that had opened so effortlessly now slammed shut. Calls from Hollywood stopped being answered. Political allies kept their distance. Social circles evaporated. In elite society, reputation is the highest currency, and hers was suddenly declared worthless. Contracts she touched turned toxic, every clause a trap. Opportunities withered before they began. The glossy covers and speeches that once built her image were now rebranded as evidence. Piece by piece, she had constructed the bars of her own cage. What made the attack so devastating was not only the legal precision but the engineered exile that followed. No charity could safely embrace her. No luxury brand could risk collaboration. No inner circle could afford association. Her name became a hushed warning, a story whispered in corridors of influence. She was no longer a symbol of glamour but a parable of caution. And for those watching from the outside, the lesson was chilling. True power at this level isn't measured in billions, it is measured in the ability to erase someone completely. To make them vanish, not with shouting, not with scandal, but with contracts, whispers, and precision-timed moves. The trap was sprung. In this rarefied world, love may be celebrated at altars, written into vows, and immortalized in photographs. But trust is a currency too costly to spend. Here betrayal does not earn heartbreak. It earns erasure when he whispered to Late it wasn't the end of a quarrel. It was the finale of a symphony, a masterpiece in control, proof that absolute wealth can bend even romance into strategy and turn forever into a countdown. Lauren's downfall became more than a tabloid scandal. It became a case study in how power truly operates quietly, efficiently, ruthlessly. In these circles, the greatest danger is not losing affection, but losing alignment. The chandeliers still burned bright, the canal still shimmered with borrowed beauty, but the fairy tale was stripped bare. It was never love, it was theater, a stage, a performance, a gilded trap. And in the silence that followed those final words, one truth stood undeniable. In the world of the ultra-wealthy, every vow doubles as a contract. Every embrace conceals calculation, and every betrayal is answered not with sorrow but with the cold machinery of power. The turning point did not roar with headlines or paparazzi flashes. It crept in quietly in boardrooms, in whispered dinners, in discreet meetings with media gatekeepers and entertainment elites. Connections that to outsiders seemed harmless became evidence of disloyalty, for in a world where influence itself is currency, even the faintest brush with rivals looks like treason. And treason at this level is never personal, it is strategy. For Bezos' betrayal was not heartbreak. It was data. It was a line crossed on the chessboard of extreme wealth, and in that arena there is no forgiveness, because betrayal here is never just personal, it is political. It is financial, it is survival. A single whispered word, a single handshake in the wrong circle can tilt the balance of entire empires. And when that line was crossed, Lauren's destiny slipped from her grasp. The strike that followed wasn't noisy, it was surgical, a tug on threads carefully woven. Months before, lawsuits appeared like phantoms across multiple states, drafted with surgical precision. Assets froze overnight. Banks and accounts, once endless rivers, turned into glass cages tightening around her. Doors that once opened effortlessly refused to move. Hollywood executives who once posed for photos stopped taking her calls. Political allies manufactured distance. Invitations vanished as if erased in ink. Her name, once spoken like gold, now carried the weight of risk. In those rarefied rooms, reputation is oxygen. Once poisoned, it spreads fast and it suffocates. Every move she made to recover was already compromised. Each contract she touched hid detonators, clauses designed to collapse. Each opportunity she reached for had already been laced with poison. The very magazine covers and speeches that once elevated her image now stood stacked as evidence ready to turn against her. Without realizing it, she had become the author of her own indictment, drafting her downfall page by page. What made the machinery of this plan so devastating was not only the financial destruction, but the silent exile that followed. No charity dared carry her name, no luxury brand could risk her face. No inner circle would accept her presence. She became untouchable, not powerful but contagious. Her story stopped glittering with glamour and instead became a whispered warning, passed in hushed tones through the corridors of influence. She was no longer a guest at the table of power. She was the example on the menu, and the lesson wasn't taught through tabloid headlines but through observation by those who understood how power works. At this level, power is not measured in money alone. It is measured in the capacity to erase someone completely. Not with public shaming but with legal ink. Not with screaming arguments but with quiet whispers. Not with fury but with strategy. In this rarefied space, love may be celebrated at altars, but behind every celebration lies another truth. Every embrace hides a calculation. Every vow conceals a clause. And every betrayal demands not sorrow but disappearance. So when Bezos finally whispered to Late inside that Venetian palace, it was not an ending to a fight. It was the closing scene of a performance, the grand finale of a story that had never been a fairy tale at all. It was proof that absolute wealth can disguise strategy as romance and turn forever into nothing more than a countdown. In the days that followed, silence became louder than any confrontation. Because silence, there was never emptiness, it was signal. Every ignored call, every unanswered message, every door that no longer opened became another stone in the invisible fortress closing around her. She had once believed wealth meant freedom. Now she discovered wealth could just as easily be a cage, and the richer the partner, the sharper its bars. The chandeliers still gleamed. The canal still sparkled. The wedding photograph still decorated glossy covers worldwide. Yet her reality had already shifted. She was no longer simply a bride. She was the cautionary tale. And she was beginning to see that the stage of power is never about the dress, the rings, or the romance. It is about the machinery hidden in the shadows, pulling the strings. The lawyers, the strategists, the networks, all of them were waiting patient as hunters for the perfect moment to flip the story. To the public it glittered as romance, but to the insiders it was nothing but clauses, contracts, and endless fine print. They saw the scaffolding propping up the illusion of love, and understood that at any moment that same structure could collapse. And she would be buried beneath it because in this system nothing is truly personal. Everything is leverage. Her once glamorous social media posts transformed into monitored signals. Each caption was dissected as evidence, each photograph tagged as an entry in a growing dossier. Algorithms didn't search her words for beauty but for breach. She thought she was curating her image, but in truth the image was constructing her cage. Every click, every share, every viral moment, not triumphs but nails tightening the bars around her hammered in by her own hands. The countdown didn't climax with an explosion. It ended with suffocating isolation. Her circle shrank to a whisper. Allies melted away, leaving only silence. Events where her presence once signaled prestige now treated her name as liability. She could still walk into rooms, but she no longer carried weight. She moved like a shadow of herself, not because she lost her essence, but because she had been methodically unmade. That is what true power looks like at this height. It does not roar, it does not rage, it simply rearranges the air around you until you are erased without a single raised voice. Erasure here is not cruelty, it is method. And so the fairy tale everyone believed they were witnessing revealed itself for what it had always been: a stage, a performance, a velvet-lined trap. Her vows were never just promises, they were clauses. Her embraces were never just affection, they were calculations. Her future was not unfolding but already written. And when the whisper to late finally landed in the silence, it was not heartbreak, it was judgment. The wedding in Venice was sold to the world as a love story etched in gold and water. It wasn't just an event, it was a spectacle staged on history's grandest stage. A city that had hosted kings, poets, and conquerors now became the backdrop for a billionaire's fairy tale. Gondolas slid across the canals as if choreographed for cinema. Palaces unlocked their gates as though time itself had been persuaded into silence. Guests descended from private jets draped in gowns that shimmered like liquid fire, ferried across the water beneath Mediterranean skies burning with twilight. Every detail radiated romance, but every detail also radiated control, because at that scale nothing is coincidence. The guest list was a roster of power, each invitation a calculated move, each seat at the table a piece on the board. Who entered last, who toasted first, who whispered to whom, every gesture carefully placed for a narrative larger than love. Even the chandeliers became instruments of theater, shipped from Paris, carved crystals sharp enough to imprison light itself. They sparkled not only for beauty but for symbolism, each glint a frozen tear, each shadow a reminder that darkness lingers even within brilliance. And while the cameras framed her smile for the world, other cameras hidden ones captured with colder intent. Microphones hummed beneath the music, recording whispers, tracking gestures, logging alliances. Laughter was archived for later analysis, embraces catalogued as evidence. Even the photographs that circled the globe, sold as moments of passion, were already the first entries in a case file. And when Lauren walked through that palace wrapped in velvet and gold, she believed she was stepping into forever. She believed the candles flickered for romance, the flowers arranged for beauty. But in truth, the candles burned for witnesses, and the flowers were staged as evidence, because this was never just a wedding, it was an opening act. And the true audience wasn't just the millions watching screens, but the machinery of power, seated in silence behind the curtain. So when the vows were spoken, they echoed not as promises of devotion, but as clauses disguised in another language. When the rings slid onto fingers, they weren't simply symbols of love. They were locks on a door she didn't know she had entered. And when the applause thundered across Venice, it wasn't only celebration. It was applause for the flawless execution of a performance that looked like forever, yet was already counting down to its end. The morning after should have been champagne on balconies, soft laughter under Venetian skies. But even then the glow was shifting, though she could not yet see it. While she wandered through marble halls draped in roses and silks, others moved through corridors lined with monitors, reviewing footage, dissecting recordings, cataloging moments. The palace, dressed as a sanctuary of love, had doubled as a surveillance chamber. Her first days as a bride were spent parading through canals, smiling from balconies, posing for cameras, each image sold to the world as happiness, but each one quietly archived, filed, marked confidential. She thought she was writing her story in glossy magazines. In reality, someone else was compiling a case in folders stamped with her name. Every dress, every jewel, every smile, even her silences became notes in the margins of a larger script. The reception toasts still echoed in her ears, words of unity, of love, of new beginnings. Yet inside those toasts were careful cues: investors, politicians, moguls raising glasses not just for romance but for alignment. Who congratulated warmly, who looked away, who whispered instead of clapping. Every gesture mattered. Because in this circle, nothing is random, nothing is wasted. The first week unfolded in glittering celebrations: Paris, Rome, private villas, where her presence sparkled like a jewel on display. Yet with each gathering, small details pricked at her awareness, a waiter who lingered too long. A camera tilted not toward the stage but toward her. A question repeated in different voices, different rooms. By the second week, celebration had become surveillance. Magazines praised her elegance while analysts dissected her words. Journalists captured her smile while investigators studied the placement of her hand on his arm. What she wore, what she said, what she implied, every fragment turned into data. She thought she was stepping into partnership, but she was stepping onto a stage. And the script was already written by others. By the third week, the rhythm was set. Power lunches, charity galas, endless appearances. But beneath the glamour, the scrutiny deepened. Her lunches were logged, her shopping mapped, her calls cross-checked with schedules of others. Friends texted her casually, unaware that in another room, those same conversations were already being analyzed. Who made her laugh? Who appeared in her stories? Whose name slipped from her lips? Piece by piece, the honeymoon vanished because there was never a honeymoon. There was only the countdown. Each day another page turned, another entry added to the growing file. She thought she was glowing in the light of forever. In truth, she was standing beneath a spotlight so intense it erased every shadow, because in the world of the ultra-wealthy, Hollywood is not just red carpets and champagne. It is power wrapped in secrecy, scandals buried until truth rips them to the surface. Whether it ends in courtroom, wars, shattered alliances, or betrayals played out behind velvet curtains, one thing is certain: the story never ends here. And as always, we'll be watching, digging, and uncovering the pieces they never wanted revealed. Please subscribe my channel for more unique videos.